Hey crew, it's Pitt and I am back with some more Esoterica. Today we are diving back into the works of Mr. Charles Haanel. This is the Master Key System. We are on part 18. We are reading aloud and discussing as we go along the various points that are brought to light by the text. It is not the format for everyone, but some people seem to find enjoyment in it, so you are more than welcome to tag along as we continue our exploration. Before we begin, however, if you are unfamiliar with me, any of my unconventional beliefs, or if at any point in time I lose you in the terminology, there will be several playlists linked in the corner in the box down below, as along with the original source material, so that you can get a better understanding of exactly why I say the things that I do. I try to be clear as we go along, but sometimes I fail in that. With that being said, we are going to dive in and continue our exploration of the Master Key System with Part 18. This part tells of a change in the thought of men, a change which is silently transpiring in our midst and which is unparalleled in the history of the world. The fetters of tradition are being melted off from humanity, and truth is rising fully orbed before an astonished multitude. It tells how the individual is enabled to control every form of intelligence which has not reached this level of self-recognition. It tells when and how the creative power originates. It tells how the universal produces the various combinations which result in the formation of phenomena. It explains the principle of attraction by which things are brought together, which is the sole means by which existence is carried into effect. It explains the real source of wealth of the individual. It explains the method by which attention and concentration may be developed, and shows why the power of attention is the distinguishing characteristic of every man of ability. That'll be interesting, because I am here doing some of this, right? I am removing the fetters of tradition, see the Unconventional Bible Study or the Infinite Integrations playlist, and how we are melting off of humanity the truths which they have believed for a couple of millennia, and how indeed the falling away of that is happening. I help to tell how the individual is enabled with control, but it is part of the greater, right, the Trinity. You are the body, which is the part that you use to navigate through 5D space. The soul, which is the individualized piece of divinity which is placed inside of you. You are not a god, but you are a tiny small piece of a god. And the Holy Spirit, which is the all-pervading force of creation, the electromagnetic forces of creation, of which you can take a small measure of control. All of those things are pretty non-traditional. That is something that I am actively working on dispersing to the masses as effectively as I possibly can. And so this seems to be something I might be interested in. Introduction, Part 18. In order to grow, we must obtain what is necessary for our growth. This is brought about through the law of attraction. Partly. Once again, we are going to go ahead and pop this over. This is the 8 laws of creation. I have an entire video dedicated just to these 8 laws of creation, and the law of attraction is one of the laws, right? So it is not brought about entirely through the law of attraction. His understanding of the law of attraction and my understanding of the law of attraction are not necessarily the same, right? He has given it a much broader scope than what I believe that it actually has. Mine is through direct revelation to me. Then take it with a grain of salt if you wish. But I have used those 8 laws of creation in order to effect change in my life. I have healed myself in my throat. I have healed myself in my shoulder. Through the power of the Holy Spirit, it is God allowing it to happen, but it is me directing the energies, the electromagnetic forces of creation, in order to bring myself into alignment and to effect those changes. This principle is the sole means by which the individual is differentiated from the universal, which is why I pointed it out. There are 8 laws of creation, not just one. Think for a moment. What would a man be if he were not a husband, father, or brother? If he were not interested in the social, economical, political, or religious world? He would be nothing but an abstract, theoretical, ego. He exists, therefore, only in his relation to the whole, in his relation to other men, in his relation to society. This relation constitutes his environment. He exists, therefore, in his relation to his environment and in no other way. Now, we have a particular problem here, right? It's really interesting to me how we came to the conclusion that we should not talk about politics or religion. There was a time when that was an intrinsic conversation that you had with everyone. But gradually, through time and the propaganda purported on our televisions, we have been led away from that. We have been guided to dismiss that as the realm of someone else. Right? Go listen to the preacher. He will tell you what to think about religion. There's no need to read the book for yourself. See the Unconventional Bible Study, because I vehemently disagree with that. I am not in alignment with a lot of people these days because they do this, right? They do not do this, rather. They don't pay attention to the economical situation. They trust somebody else to deal with that. They don't pay attention to the politics. It's enough that my daddy voted this way. They don't pay attention to the religious world. I grew up in this control system. Of course it's correct. You should be having discussions about these things. Understand where you stand. And if you believe the same thing that you did, then fine. If you have spent the time and invested the energy into understanding what your beliefs are, and they don't have to be what mine are, understand and don't just go off of what somebody else tells you. Don't go off of, well, my daddy voted this way, so of course I'm going to vote this way. Or somebody else is the expert, I'll just listen to them. You should not be doing that with me or with anyone else. Take everything I say and onboard it and investigate it. See if it works. If it doesn't, dismiss it. You also should not be surrounding yourself with people who are not for your benefit. And if they are making decisions based upon the things we just talked about, right? My daddy did it, or somebody else is the expert, you probably shouldn't be associating with them. They are going to lead you into that same pattern if you're not in it already. You will not be able to break that pattern if you are surrounded by the pattern. It's not going to happen. You will continue to do the things that you have always done and get the exact same results that you always have. So, I agree. If you are not interested in social, economical, political, or religious, then you are nothing but an abstract theoretical ego, or as I like to call it, an NPC. See the NPC video. Hence, it is evident that the individual is simply the differentiation of the one universal mind, which is God, which lighteth every man that cometh into the world, and his so-called individuality or personality consists of nothing but the manner in which he relates with the whole. This we call his environment, and as it is brought about by the law of attraction. Part 18 has something more to say concerning this important law. And again, there are 8 laws of creation. The law of attraction is merely one of them. Part 18. There is a change in the thought of the world. This change is silently transpiring in our midst, and it is more important than any which the world has undergone since the downfall of paganism. This is a self-insertion. We haven't had a whole lot of those that we've discussed as we went along in this particular study, but this is him assuming that his thoughts and his beliefs are better than the pagans. Now, it might be entirely true and it might be entirely false, but it's probably somewhere in the middle. Life is about balance, not exclusion. Pagan is a relative term, right? My beliefs are the right ones, and everybody else is a pagan. That is the relativism of paganism. There are so many different belief systems lumped under this one word that are not even remotely similar. There are pagans, in my estimation, that believe in animal sacrifice. They are doing things which I intrinsically believe are pretty terrible. Right? Killing a goat for the forgiveness of your sins? Are you kidding me? That is ridiculous. Having to be washed in blood to be forgiven from sins? Are you kidding me? That is ridiculous. To me, that is paganism. I believe in a fundamental God. He is all things. He is the pervading, all creative force who is holding existence together. He doesn't need you to sacrifice an animal to receive forgiveness. You can just ask for it. It's that simple. Grace is a wonderful thing. So, paganism is a self-insertion, right? To say that what I believe is better than others is a self-insertion. I am self-inserting that my belief is better than this paganism. Everybody does self-insertion. I do self-insertion. He's doing self-insertion. But you should be aware that it is a thing when you're doing it. Don't just take it for granted that because he calls it paganism, it is intrinsically bad. That will lead you into some really, really bad spirals. The present revolution, in the opinions of all classes of men, the highest and most cultured of men, as well as those of the laboring class, stands unparalleled in the history of the world. And again, this is opinions, right? Highest and most cultured, that is a relative thing. Once again, the people who were here on this continent, let's name one of the groups, right? The Cherokee, for instance, had a whole system of government that was quite cultured. They had settlements for disagreements outside of warfare. They had mutual trade agreements. They had cultivation. They had all kinds of things, even a language that was later written to express the things which they believed. That is culture. They were cultured. And just because that culture does not align with the ethnocentric or the religious centered that came from Europe to this continent, doesn't mean that they were pagans or less cultured. They were differently cultured. Now, there are some cultures which are unacceptable, right? There are things that I find unacceptable. That is a self-insertion. I don't believe in cannibalism. That is something that other people do. I don't necessarily believe that my way has to be the only way. You can find a separate route to God because God will find you where you are. So my religion and your religion don't have to correlate. But if you believe things that I intrinsically don't, then I'm not going to be with you, right? I'm not going to associate with you if you believe in human sacrifice. I think that's pretty atrocious. If you believe that melanin makes a difference in anything, then I'm not going to associate with you. I find that pretty atrocious. If you find that someone having different genitalia than you makes them less of a person, I'm not going to associate with you. I find that atrocious. I don't necessarily find you atrocious. You're just misguided. But by me associating with you and you believing in these things, it's going to lead me into a path where those things become a reality in my life. I am going to separate myself from that. I'm not going to tell you you're wrong. I'm not going to associate. That's how I handle that. Keep in mind that these self-insertions happen, right? My religion is better than yours. My culture is better than yours. My government is better than yours. My political party is better than yours. Sometimes it can be objectively true, but most times it is only relatively true. That is an important point to keep in mind. Science has, of late, made such vast discoveries, has revealed such an infinity of resources, has unveiled such enormous possibilities and such unsuspected forces, that scientific men more and more hesitate to affirm certain theories as established and indubitable, or to deny other theories as absurd or impossible. They got away from that. A new civilization is being born. Customs, creeds, and precedent are passing. Vision, faith, and service are taking their place. The fetters of tradition are being melted off from humanity. And, as the dross of materialism is being consumed, thought is being liberated and truth is rising full-orbed before an astonished multitude. Yeah, that kind of didn't go the way that he thought it was. Now, this was back in 1917, right? Back between the First and the Second World War. Science was really taking off. There was some great advancements that happened. But this dross of materialism being consumed, no, that didn't happen. We are consumed by materialism right now. Thought being liberated and truth rising, not necessarily. There are people who will vehemently follow regardless. There are scientific explorations that are shut off completely. That is the process of peer review, right? I don't believe that your inquiry is appropriate, so you don't get to publish, even though you have substantial facts to back up your claims. If you'd like more on that, check out the Thunderbolts Project, where they have literally done the scientific experiments to recreate the formation of the Earth. Not the scale, of course, but the conditions have been met, and they are completely dismissed. Like completely dismissed. They do not fit the paradigm, so they are not allowed to publish. That is a problem, right? That is what happened from here. We did not achieve liberation and truth. It didn't happen. There are still control systems. That is a fact. And so, once again, it is both true and untrue. Right? Some customs, creeds, and precedent did pass. Like, nobody believes the earth is flat. Well, most people don't believe the earth is flat. It's not. If you are at all in doubt about it, I have seen the curvature of the earth. I did that while I was in the Navy. I have explained that before. I'm not going to dive into it again, but I have seen it. Right? Not the great fall off, but a small fall off. I have seen how the earth curves. And so I don't believe you when you say that there is a firmament firmly attached and we can't launch satellites. Well, I have been involved in the launching of things. So I know that it does go indeed past the firmament. There are a multitude of things that people believe that are incorrect. All right, we'll leave that there. The whole world is on the eve of a new consciousness, a new power, and a new realization within the self. If only. Physical science has resolved matter into molecules, molecules into atoms, atoms into energy. And it has remained for Sir Ambrose Fleming, in an address before the Royal Institution, to resolve this energy into mind. He says, in its ultimate essence, energy may be incomprehensible by us except as an exhibition of the direct operation of that which we call mind or will. And again, that is kind of true and kind of not, right? There is the observation effect, right? If you shoot light through a hole, it is both a particle and a wave at the same time, which is impossible. Which way that you observe it makes a difference in which way that it presents. If you are observing it as a individual photon, then it will be an individual photon. But if you are observing it as a wave, you will see it as the wave. That is in part this, but the light exists whether or not you are observing it. There is still light in places where humanity is not. If a tree falls in the forest, yes, it does make a fucking sound. You are not the focus of the life. You are a focus. You are in charge of your section of the timeline, but there are other things out there. Reality exists whether or not you are there. There is still something behind me if I am not looking. This relativism where everything is dependent upon your mind is silly. Things still exist even if you don't believe in them. And this mind is the indwelling and ultimate. It is immanent in matter as in spirit. It is the sustaining, energizing, all-pervading spirit of the universe. That mind is God's mind, right? That is beyond the scope of us. That is not something that we are in control of. We can take a small measure of control of the Holy Spirit, which is God, but we don't have full control of it. We can state our intentions, we can invest our energy, we can move energy, but we're still not in control of all the energy. That is another very important distinction. Every living thing must be sustained by its omnipotent intelligence, and we find the difference in individual lives to be largely measured by the degree of this intelligence which they manifest. It is greater intelligence that places the animal in a higher scale of being than the plant, the man higher than the animal, and we find that this increased intelligence is again indicated by the power of the individual to control modes of action and thus to consciously adjust himself to his environment. We have talked about this theory of spiritual evolution. I'm not going to dive into it again, but that is in large part what he is talking about here. Right? Intelligence is the separation between the third and the fourth plane. We are in the fifth. It is this adjustment that occupies the attention of the greatest minds, and this adjustment consists in nothing else than the recognition of an order existing in the universal mind. For it is well known that this mind will obey us precisely in proportion as we first obey it. It is the recognition of natural laws that has enabled us to annihilate time and space, to soar in the air and make iron float. And the greater the degree of intelligence, the greater will be the recognition of these natural laws, and the greater will be the power we can possess. That is why I harp so often upon these 8 laws of creation. Being in balance and understanding these is how manifestation and karma are governed. It is the recognition of the self as an individualization of this universal intelligence that enables the individual to control those forms of intelligence which have not yet reached this level of self-recognition. Y'all can't see the dogs behind me, but they are there. They do not know that this universal intelligence permeates all things, that is the Holy Spirit, ready to be called into action, that is true. They do not know that it is responsive to every demand, and they are therefore in bondage to the law of their own being. It is always there. It is always willing to do what you will it to do. And that is why I focus so much on concentrate on the things which you want and not the things that you don't. Because if you are concentrating on the things that you don't, you are still telling the universal mind to bring it to you. Thought is creative, and the principle on which the law is based is sound and legitimate and is inherent in the nature of things. But this creative power does not originate in the individual, but in the universal, which is the source and foundation of all energy and substance. The individual is simply the channel for the distribution of this energy. Now you pilot the body. You are the spirit, the soul residing that makes the decisions, right? The tiny individualized piece of creation that makes the decisions in 5D space to navigate this body. The spirit created the body for you and allows you to navigate it. When you make the decision to wiggle your fingers, you don't really make that happen. The spirit does. You made the decision, the spirit allows it to happen for the temple. The individual is simply a means by which the universal produces various combinations, which result in the formation of phenomena. These depend upon the law of vibration. It's not a law. Whereby various rates of rapidity and motion in the primary substance form new substances only in certain exact numerical ratios. Right? The law of vibration is the law of rhythm and the law of returns. Both, right? But not really, right? He is taking a part of the law of rhythm and a part of the law of returns and combining them into the law of creation, or the law of vibration. Thought is the invisible link by which the individual comes into communication with the universal, the finite with the infinite, the seen with the unseen. Thought is the magic by which the human being is transformed into a being who thinks and knows and feels and acts. As the proper apparatus has enabled the eye to discover worlds without number, millions of miles away, so the proper understanding, so with the proper understanding, man has been enabled to communicate with the universal mind, the source of all power. that is meditation, right? Prayer, fasting, and meditation, the three keys to manifestation. Prayer is talking to God, fasting is allowing yourself to become more receptive, and meditation is allowing God to talk back to you. That is the trinity of creation, of manifestation. By that is what you can intentionally manifest. You are going to manifest regardless. You will call into your life things regardless of whether you understand the 8 laws of creation and practically apply them in your life, and whether or not you are intentionally doing prayer, fasting, and meditation. If you say your prayers and you don't spend time listening back, you're still going to create things that will just be misaligned. The understanding, which is usually developed, is about as valuable as a telephone box without wires, or an exchange. In fact, it is usually nothing more than a belief, which means nothing at all. The Indians believe something, and so do the savages of the Cannibal Islands, but that proves nothing. Self-insertion. The only belief which is of any value to anyone is a belief that has been put to the test and demonstrated to be a fact. It is then no longer a belief, but it has become living faith, or the truth. That's why I tell you so often that I have healed myself, right? I have put it to the test. Most people do not have the determination to do so. Most people have already clicked away from this video. They are not seeking this information. I have healed myself through the direct manipulation of the electromagnetic forces of creation. That is something that has happened in my life. And this truth has been put to the test by hundreds of thousands of people, and has been found to be the truth exactly in proportion to the usefulness of the apparatus which they used. A man would not expect to locate stars hundreds of millions of miles away without a sufficiently strong telescope, and for this reason science is continually engaged in building larger and more powerful telescopes, and is continually rewarded by additional knowledge of the heavenly bodies. Now we launch them into space, which is a thing, and we observe planets millions of miles away. Mostly, right? If you don't know, most of what we see that far away is an extrapolation of data, right? What we get from the James Webb telescope is light, but we filter that light through various lenses to understand what is happening. So, with understanding, men are continually making progress in the methods which they use to come into communication with the universal mind and its infinite possibilities. The universal mind manifests itself in the objective, through the principle of attraction that each atom has for each other atom, in infinite degrees of intensity. It is by this principle of combining and attracting that things are brought together. This principle is of universal application, and is the sole means whereby the purpose of existence is carried into effect. The expression of growth is met in a most beautiful manner through the instrumentality of this universal principle. In order to grow, we must obtain what is essential for our growth, but we are at all times a complete thought entity. This completeness makes it possible for us to receive only as we give. Growth is therefore conditioned on reciprocal action. And we find that on the mental plane, like attracts like, that mental vibrations respond only to the extent of their vibratory harmony. Like does attract like. That is the law of attraction. Things of a similar nature tend to cluster. You, by focusing upon the thing which you desire, call into existence the thing you desire. You, by focusing upon the thing you do not desire, call into existence the thing you do not desire. You should be focusing upon the things which you want in your life and spend less time focusing on the things you don't. The way that you achieve that is by going to the thing you don't want first, and then understanding exactly why you don't want it. That can be a myriad of things, right? It can be poverty, it can be grief, it can be whatever. Depression, anxiety, addiction. You need to understand the why that you feel that, because you do feel it. You can't deny your feelings. You can bottle them up and allow them to poison you, but they're still there. No amount of denial is going to get rid of grief or sadness, right? You cannot deny that into non-existence. You have to experience it into irrelevancy. The more that you experience it, the more irrelevant it becomes. That is not focusing, right? You go back and you root cause it. You understand it. You cry, you rage, you scream, you do whatever that you need to do to get that emotion out of you, and then you let it go. And then you shift your focus to that which you do want immediately in the same thought process, right? Feel your grief and then focus towards hope, right? Change your thought pattern, but first understand the why you do not want. That will help you to not continuously go back to it. If you bottle up grief, for example, and instead of crying or whatever it takes to get it out of you, then every time that you try to focus on the positive, that grief is going to pull you back. It is still inside of you. And that will become your focus. It can be negativity, it can be politics, it can be whatever. You need to express it and purge it, and then shift your focus to what you do want. Gradually, you will become that which you do not want. Does that mean you will never feel grief? Absolutely not. But now you are equipped with how to deal with that and not call more grief into your life. That is the mechanics here. It is clear, therefore, that thoughts of abundance will respond only to similar thoughts. The wealth of the individual is seen to be what he inherently is. Affluence within is found to be the secret of attraction for affluence without. The ability to produce is found to be the real source of wealth of the individual. It is for this reason that he who has his heart in his work is certain to meet with unbounded success. He will give and continually give, and the more he gives, the more he will receive. Yeah. What do the great financiers of the city and Wall Street, the captains of industry, the statesmen, the great company lawyers, the inventors, the physicians, the authors, what do each of these contribute to the sum of human happiness but the power of their thought? Thought is the energy by which the law of attraction is brought into operation, which eventually manifests in abundance, right, or into negativity. You can manifest negative. The universal mind is static mind, or substance in equilibrium. It is differentiated into form by our power to think. Thought is the dynamic phase of mind. Power depends upon consciousness of power. Unless we use it, we shall lose it. And unless we are conscious of it, we cannot use it. And again, that is simply not true. You can use the power even if you don't understand it. Even if you don't know it's happening, it is still happening. The tree falling in the forest does make a sound. The use of this power depends upon attention. The degree of attention determines our capacity for the acquirement of knowledge, which is another name for power. Attention has been held to be the distinguishing mark of genius. The cultivation of attention depends upon practice. The incentive of attention is interest. The greater the interest, the greater the attention. The greater the attention, the greater the interest. Action and reaction begin by paying attention. Before long you will have aroused interest, and interest will attract more attention, and this attention will produce more interest, and so on. This practice will enable you to cultivate the power of attention. That is in part what we were just talking about going and feeling your grief or your whatever, right? You are learning to take that and manifest the positive out of it by going and doing it. Not focusing on, oh, I am so sad, but letting that emotion out and then realizing that you were sad for this reason and letting it go. Now, concentrate upon your power to create. Seek insight, perception. Try to find a logical basis for the faith which is in you. Let the thought dwell on the fact that the physical man lives and moves and has his being in the sustainer of all organic life, in air which he must breathe to live. Let the thought rest on the fact that the spiritual man also lives and moves and has his being in a similar but subtler energy upon which he must depend for life, and that as in the physical world no life assumes form until after a seed is sown, and no higher fruit than that of the parent stock can be produced, so in the spiritual world no effect can be produced until the seed is sown, and the fruit will depend upon the nature of the seed, so that the results which you secure depend upon your perception of law in the mighty domain of causation, which knowledge is the highest evolution of human consciousness. Thought engenders thought. Place one idea upon paper, another will follow it, and still another, until you have written a page. You cannot fathom your mind. It is a well of thought which has no bottom. The more you draw from it, the more clear and fruitful it will be. If you neglect to think yourself, to use other people's thoughts, giving them utterance only, you will never know what you are capable of. Take nothing on blind faith. G.A. Sala. Part 18. Questions. How is the difference in individual lives measured? By the degree of intelligence which they manifest. What is the law by which the individual may control other forms of intelligence? A recognition of the self as an individualization of the universal intelligence. Where does creative power originate? In the universal. How does the universal create form? By means of the individual. What is the connecting link between the individual and the universal? Thought. What is the principle by which the means of existence is carried into effect? The law of love. That is not one of the laws. How is the principle brought into expression? By the law of growth. Again, not one of the laws. Upon what condition does the law of growth depend? Upon reciprocal action. That would be the law of response or the law of rhythm. The individual is complete at all times, and this makes it possible to receive only as we give. What is it that we give? Thought. What do we receive? Thought, which in substance in equilibrium, and which is constantly being differentiated in form by what we think. Happiness of your life depends upon the quality of your thoughts. Therefore, guard accordingly, and take care that you entertain no notions unsuitable to virtue and reasonable nature. Marcus Antonius. And that is going to bring us to the end of, what are we on? We're on 18? Yes. We'll bring us to the end of 18. Hopefully I brought a little bit of enlightenment and not too much confusion to a somewhat difficult topic. I understand that I hold some unconventional beliefs and I have a tendency to step on toes when I relay those. It is not intentional, but I do not apologize for it. The clarifications that I am attempting to give are effective. They have been effective in my life. I have manifested things that other people consider impossible. I have doubters in my own life about things that have happened in my own body. That's fine. You don't have to believe me. I am here to tell you, not to convince you. The steps that I tell you in this playlist and the others will get you where you need to go. These things happen whether you believe in them or not. There is still the 8 laws of creation, whether or not you acknowledge the 8 laws of creation. They are still affecting your life whether or not you will believe that that is happening. By learning to understand where the negative comes from, you learn to release the negative. That's not really focusing on the negative. That is coming to an understanding. The focusing is where you concentrate your mind. If you are not actively concentrating towards the positive, the natural inclination is going to be to focus upon the negative. You have to learn to train your mind to understand the negative and then focus on the positive. That is the means by which you can affect the change in your life. You get what you focus upon, right? By going and understanding the negative and getting the underlying principles, you can shift that focus from the negative to the positive. If you are not shifting that focus intentionally, you are going to call more negative into your life unintentionally. It's like the spiral of choice. If you are not actively choosing to walk up the spiral, you are inactively choosing to walk down it. Choose to walk up the spiral. Choose to take the hardest path. Choose to focus upon the positive in your life. These things are the most effective. Right? Practice your prayer, fasting, and meditation. Those lead to you being able to do this better. Part of meditation is understanding, right? That is learning why. That is part of the meditative process. You ask the question, you allow the answer to come to you. Part of that is intuition. Part of that is unintentional. Part of it is your memories. If you like what I'm doing over here, let me know down below. Give me a like, share, and a sub. Throw me a comment if you agree or disagree. If you remain respectful, it gets to remain up. And if there's another work that you would like to see along the lines of what we are doing here, let me know down below, because I am making a list. If you really like what I'm doing, hit me with that super thanks. To the crew, thanks for hanging out. I appreciate every single minute that you are here with me, and I am praying for you every single day. Until next time, I love you. God loves you. You are perfect, whole, and complete just the way that you are. And this has been Pit Steak. Peace.